budding heroes trek to every corner of Barsave, exploring what remains of their world in the wake of the life-destroying scourge. As they search for fortune and battle unspeakable monsters, these fearless adepts record their discoveries, triumphs, and defeats. The journals and letters describing their adventures form the Book of Exploration, an ever-growing record of the current state of Barsave. Assembled and maintained by the Great Library of Thrall, the Book of Exploration offers adventurers a wealth of information by posing questions, recounting legends, offering clues to ancient puzzles, describing both unimaginable depravity and selfless sacrifice, and telling the many tales that make up the tapestry of Name-Giver experience. The following account, apparently a letter to the unfortunate writer's kin, was brought to the Great Library by the famed traveled scholar Coram Broadroot. While sojourning through the wild lands not far from the city of Jerris, Coram shot a dove for his evening meal and found, to his great surprise and sorrow, that he had inadvertently slain a messenger bird bearing the text below. As there was no way to determine where the lands of the Windling clan Masquerade might lie, or indeed if the clan still existed at all, Coram pocketed the message and brought it to the Great Library's archives. Let it serve as a warning to travelers through Barsave's wild lands. Peril lurks everywhere and may entrap even the most prepared. Ferlin Solus, apprentice scribe of the Great Library of Thrall. A plea for help. To Clan Masquerade and my darling parents, I know not how to begin this letter, in such peril as I am. At this moment, I miss you and home more than ever I have throughout all my travels, partly because I fear I may never see home again. I pray this reaches you in time for my rescue. If not, then I pray you and the clan will avenge my death. For 5 years I have adventured across the length and breadth of Barsave, facing many perils from wild beasts to the foulest of horrors, and yet never has my danger been so great as it is now. The smell here is terrible, like the stench of the Carrul that Clock and I slew, a stench to close the throat tight as a stoppered wineskin. I faced the Carrul bravely as it circled us. Its cry pierced through my head bones, shrill and grating. Then it dove straight at me. I flew as fast as my wings would carry me, staying just out of its reach. Around and around we went, the Carrul and I, until I came near to fainting from exhaustion. But still I bedeviled it, swooping and diving and darting as close as I dared to its loathsome face. As I batted my wings near its terrible eyes, distracting it from my comrades below, my good friend Clock, the orc, swung his sword through its belly. The smell of its entrails made me choke so violently and suddenly that I dropped like a stone. Luckily, Clock is a soft-handed orc for all his sword-fighting prowess. He caught me scarcely a body length from the ground. I am rambling, and I must not. I have not much time to tell my tale. Lack of food has turned my brain a little. It is hard to keep my mind on the task at hand. The stink of this prison where I lie does not help matters. Remarkable how difficult it is to think clearly when one breathes air as thick and foul as a globberog's trail. The Carrul's attack came after a day more full of hardships than any we had lived through in recent memory. Is it any wonder that we slept too soundly? Had luck been with us that night, we would not have paid such a dear price for our lapse. But luck is rarely with the adventurer in Barsave. We all believed we had learned that lesson, but we were wrong. I awoke to the rustle of cloth and rough hands wrapping my wrists in cold metal. By the scant light of our banked fire I could see little, only that dim figures in dark robes were bending over my companions, who all slept on oblivious. I shouted, but too late. Though we fought them with the strength of our very souls, the chains they bound around us would not break. Our wizard, Fatso, his name is Forso, but none of us call him by it, told us the chains were enchanted. Our captors remained silent, hidden in their enfolding robes. They did not speak, nor did they peel back their hoods. I could not even see if there were faces underneath the overhanging folds of dark cloth. Once they had us shackled, they forced us to our feet. We began to move, the robed ones walking as easily as if they could see in the dark. When the sun rose, I saw that we were traveling east toward the Eris Sea. Our captors prodded us none too gently with wooden staves whenever we stumbled. The seabirds called to me from above, but I would not fly away and leave my companions. The cloaked creatures kept a constant vigil over us, peering at us from the darkness beneath their hoods. They gave us neither food nor water for 2 days. The sun remained as vigilant as they, offering not a moment's respite from its heat. Poor Clock's nose looked like an overripe tomato. He sang to us to ease our discomfort. By the middle of the second day, he could not continue, a small mercy for which we were grateful. At last, our cloaked guardians stopped at a sheltered clearing near the seashore. Here we found half a house, some 3 feet tall. Our captors led us inside and down a flight of steps, and we realized that the dwelling lay partly buried underground. Inside, it was as spacious as a hut built large enough for humans. A maze of tunnels led off from the main room, in so many directions that to look at all the openings made me dizzy. Suddenly, the thought of being buried under the earth seemed worse than death. I panicked and swooped toward the staircase, or tried to. The weight of the chains proved my undoing, with coils of metal dragging at my wrists and ankles. I could not fly fast enough to escape the hands of our mysterious captors. The hooded monsters caught me. They cut off my wings. Now I lie here in their dungeon, trapped. These cloaked demons have revealed much since we arrived in their den. One by one, they took my friends away. I hear their screams still, and I bleed inside for their suffering. But for all the pain inflicted on them, embrace of the demon's horror god they would not. For this, my poor companions paid with their lives. Every cry wrung from them pierced my soul like the point of a sword, and hardened in me the desire for revenge. When the hooded ones came for me, I told them I needed time to think things over. This answer earned me a dubious reward. They took down their hoods and smiled at me. The sight of them nearly paralyzed me with shock. They were not monstrous creatures or horrors, but ordinary-looking name-givers. The face of one of them was even marked with a tattoo that served no other purpose than vanity. I know, for I have seen many a vain fool receiving such marks in Bartertown stalls. As that one told me about the being they call their supreme creator, his wispy white hair floated up and down like a young windling on his first flight. Under any other circumstances, I would have taken him for someone's kindly grandsire telling a fireside tale. No matter their benign look, these evil beings are a few petals short of a full bloom. The supreme creator they serve is the horror called Ristool, which they believe has come to free them from their burdens. Free them at will, right into their graves, if I am any judge. I have nearly given up hope of escape, unless this message reaches you in time to save me. But I will not give in to them. I know not precisely where I am, but I know we are by the shores of the Eris, in a region almost wholly lacking in animal life. So barren is the land hereabouts that I could not summon any of Barsave's more chivalrous creatures to help me, save the lone dove that will carry this letter to you. May it arrive with all speed. Clock once told me that in 2 days' time a dove can fly across half of Barsave. Treat this bird well, for the poor creature will be exhausted almost to death by the time you read this. I shall try to match this bird's courage and stamina, and hold out until you come for me. To the trees of verdant Masquerade shall my heart always turn, no matter how much of the world I see, or how much I learn. May your wings always be dry. Redwing. As my son Lorix wished, I have included the following account in this volume. It, and the map he gave us along with it, raise more questions than they answer about the perilous place herein described. Tom Edrell, Archivist and Scribe of the Hall of Records, 1508, Thrall. The Fountain Parchment. Truly we've come to a place forsaken by the passions, by the very universe, I'd say. The dirtiest street in Jerris looks like paradise by comparison. I wish we were back there. Should have listened to my old dad. He said a dwarf was never meant to go traipsing across the wilds of Barsave looking for who knows what, and he was right. I've dust in my mouth and all down my throat. No amount of water seems to slake the thirst it brings. Midges are biting, too. My body is one giant itch. An extra cloak might keep them away from my tender skin, but in this heat, I'd wilt under it faster than a young wheat in a drought. No, there's nothing for it but to suffer and hope that what awaits us is worth the discomfort. The risks of battle I can take. It's the nagging unpleasantness I can't stand. Mustn't complain, though. Bad for morale, complaining. As a dwarf, it's up to me to set an example. I don't like to say it within Varrock's hearing. The old orc does so prize his scraggly bit of parchment, but I wonder if that thing he insists on calling an ancient treasure map is anything more than a schoolboy prank. I'm no expert in antiquities, but I've made new paper look old just by soaking it in tea and crumpling it up a bit. Got me thrown out of the library scribe school, that one. But it was such fun to see their faces when they first found it. Varroc's clever enough, and he knows quite a lot about ancient Barsave, but even the smart ones can be fooled. Who's to say this isn't one of those times? 5 minutes rest at the top of this rise, Merrilee says. Varroc's grumbling, but Merrilee's our leader, and what she says goes. Thank the universe. My feet are killing me. Here's something strange. Down below, along the blasted plains, they're sort of shimmering in the air, and the wind suddenly smells overpoweringly of damp earth. We are camped not too far from the shimmering place. Truly, we've found a wonder. Somewhere behind the veil, or whatever it is, lies a veritable fountain of elemental earth. That's the only explanation, Vardock says, and I think he may be right. Kernels of elemental earth come shooting out from behind the shimmering to land at our feet every few heartbeats. Just like water from a fountain. It's an amazing sight, enough to make even Dad's eyes pop out. The ground is littered with elemental earth. We're camped on top of a fortune, with more appearing to replace whatever we take. I owe Vardock an apology. His bit of parchment said that there was untold wealth out here in the wastes, and we found it right where he expected it to be. Funny, though, that the map doesn't say exactly what this place is. Vardock's pulling out his stylus and ink. I think he means to rectify that little oversight. A stickler for details is Vardock. The wind's picking up. No decent-sized rocks nearby to anchor my tent with. Ah well, I knew I'd find a use for my tool belt sometime on this journey. A couple of rock hammers and chisels at the corners ought to do nicely. The light is dying as I write this, and somehow my small fire offers me little comfort. I haven't been afraid of the dark since I was a youngling. Until now. My hands are shaking so much it's hard to write, yet I must tell the end of the story, in case I don't make it back to civilization. Someone's got to warn the fools who are bound to come after us. We should have known our find was too good to be true. They say riches never come without a price. Only I never heard the price could be death before you even get a chance to spend your gains, ill-gotten or otherwise. Vardock went first. Silly old fool tried some strange magical thing that I didn't half understand. He wanted to step through the veil and get a good look at the fountain, if it was a fountain. He roused something with his spell. A magical trap, a horror, who knows what. The earth tore open under his feet and swallowed him. We heard him screaming for a long way down until the fissure closed. After that, Merrilee said to break camp, and no one argued. Without our magician, we'd no way to fight bad magic or some horror we couldn't even see. So we left. 4 hours we put between ourselves and that cursed fountain, before making camp for the night. We thought that was far enough, and the horses could go no further. We were wrong. The shaking of the earth woke me, just in time to see Merrilee go sliding in a shower of dirt down a crevasse that hadn't been there before. Great cracks rippled through the ground, leaving the rest of us perched precariously on islands of earth and praying not to fall off. My poor cousin Dinchus, whom I'd talked into this wild chase against his better judgment, plunged to his death when the earth on which he lay dissolved out from under him. Only I survived, clinging to my tiny patch of ground until the earthquake ended and the torn soil knit itself together again. So here I sit, praying that whatever killed my comrades has had its fill of name-giver blood and won't come after me. Just for good measure, I've thrown away all the elemental earth I took from the fountain. For all I know, those kernels carry a horror's curse. Just let me survive. That's all I ask of the universe. Let me survive and I'll carry Vardock's blasted parchment back to the Great Library and make sure everyone knows to stay far away from the elemental earth fountain. Some prices aren't worth paying for riches. This eerie tale was told to me by Tsokija Liltvoice, a talented troubadour and good friend, over several flagons of good dwarf ale in the winter of 1503. She told me then that she meant to make a song of it, but recently she said that she had changed her mind. When pressed for a reason, she would say only that she feared that death might not like it, and then where would we be? She would not or could not clarify that odd remark. I considered her story worth a mention, regardless of what death might think. How is a sleeping passion, if such death is, to read this book anyway? Ferlin Solus, apprentice scribe of the Great Library of Thrall. Masquerade of Death's Dreams. I clutched the ceramic mask to my chest, trying to calm my breathing into the rhythms of sleep. As my fingers traced a soothing pattern over the jade eyes of the mask, As my fingers traced a soothing pattern over the jade eyes of the mask I held, I pictured Janissaire in my mind's eye. I felt the firm shake of his hand, heard his throaty chuckle. I tried to remember everything about him, knowing that to unmask incorrectly is to die. The cold, wet ground beneath me melted in my dreams to warm, polished wood. Quickly, I concealed my own features and smoothed my dress before joining the masquerade. Dozens of figures danced all around me, some in finery ancient before the scourge, some in plain raiment, some in the rags of burial shrouds. All flowed through the dance wearing masks, as I did. A gaunt figure garbed in the burial wrap of Jairus glided across the floor toward me. As the man approached, the Nethermancer's last words to me rang in my ears. "Flirt with the truth, for they will use it against you. Tell no lies, for then they will have you. Only one mask holds the key to Janissaire's life. The others hold your death." The dead man bowed deeply. His bony fingers rasped against the palm of my proffered hand, and his mask shifted just enough for desiccated lips to touch the back of my hand, with the memory of a kiss. In that brief flash of mummified features, I glimpsed nothing familiar. "Would milady honor me with the next dance?" The dead man hissed. I nodded assent. A skeletal hand scraped into position around my waist, while I placed a faltering hand upon my partner's withered shoulder. He tipped his mask slightly in salute, and pressure from dead fingers shot fear through my spine as he whirled me onto the floor. The dance moved more quickly than I had expected, and my steps faltered as I fumbled through flourishes last popular in the Cares 2 centuries ago. The light touch of my companion's bone fingers tickled my skin, but I dared not flinch from this long-dead man. "What brings such a lovely lady out on such a dark-hearted night?" the dead man asked me. His voice rattled like dry branches in a high wind. "I am here for much the same reason as my gentleman partner," I answered. "Ah, a coquette in conversation. I had forgotten the pleasures of subtle speech," said the dead man. "A pleasure which can often save face," I said. The dead man chortled, a low, raspy sound that shook his mask slightly. The dance slowed for a heartbeat, and he bent me over in a low dip. The wrinkled flesh of his arms crackled as we bent. His face neared mine. His mask filled my vision. The musty scent of rot filled my nose, and I gasped as cold, ceramic lips lightly brushed my left ear. "Death sleeps not forever. You must choose before she awakes, or forever lose your chance," the dead man whispered. As the music ended, I trembled into a curtsy. The dead man bowed gallantly, then left me as I sought new partners. Nobles and warriors, merchants and questers, beggars and thieves. All these I danced with, all of them dead. All were hungry for the life that coursed in my blood. Some spoke with circumspection. Others wrapped me in lies smoother than silk, softer than fresh plucked down. My mind spun faster than the dance steps. My gaze flickered across the crowd, seeking through the flashes of brilliant silks and dark leathers for the one whose need had brought me here. Then I saw him, dressed in leather armor and boots, wearing the same impassive mask that all the others wore. My throat tightened, and my breath seemed to press against my mask. He saw me at the same moment and approached with long, confident strides. As he reached me, he held out his hand. I settled into his arms and began my last dance. His lead was strong and sure. My steps flowed with his. It felt good, familiar. It felt like Janissaire. "Perhaps I have had this pleasure before?" he asked. "Perhaps we simply enjoy the same dance," I responded. My partner whirled me to the center of the floor. Memories of our first heady days in Trevar flooded my mind. Janissaire showing me the frantic steps of the old dance on that tavern roof, ignoring the shouts of the guards. Watching the sunset from the western wall, walking around the city 3 times to prolong a perfect evening. The last time splashing through puddles left by a sudden rain. "Would you like to feel the rain?" I asked softly. "The air, the rain, and the sun. I have missed them all, but none more than you," my partner said. I reached up for his mask, but hesitated as my hands touched its cold surface. My partner felt like Janissaur, but some here would have had centuries' worth of practice telling all manner of lies. He sounded like Janissaur, but the words he had spoken were too direct for this place of dreams. The old dance. I withdrew my hand and turned to face the first dead man who had danced with me. "Would you like to feel the rain?" I said. "Milady, I fear this time I can go around but once," the dead man answered. With trembling hands I took off my mask, then reached up and gently removed his. This account I transcribed during an evening's drinking at the Ragged Rat in Bartertown. My drinking companion, the sky raider Ergu Longhorns, first caught my attention by talking of Theran ships swarming around the Thunder Mountains. We at the Great Library had heard disquieting rumors of increased Theran activity in both the Twilight Peaks and the Thunder Mountains, and so I bought Ergu Longhorns a drink and asked to hear his tale. I have written down his words to the best of my recollection, and Master Merox chose to include this account here, so that the heroes of Barsave might be vigilant against Theran incursions. Naled Inbar, apprentice archivist to the Great Library of Thrall. Carrul and the Therans. The best airship captain in Barsave is Carrul. He can cut a course through the air quicker than a raven, gliding through the roughest currents as smoothly as if sliding over glass. Even a ground stomper like you would feel at ease with Carrul at the helm. A canny fighter he is, too. Just weeks ago he led us against the Therans in a great battle. I'll remember it if I live to be 500. We'd seen Theran airships off and on for a month or two, sniffing around the Thunder Mountains like hunting dogs on a scent. We thought at first they were trying to draw us into battle. But when we sent a few Drakars after them, they turned tail and ran for Sky Point. Some of our warriors sneered at that, saying it only proved what cowards the Therans really are. Carrul wasn't so sure. After the third time a Theran ship fled from us without a fight, Carrul set our moot's best scouts to keep watch for Theran airships in the foothills. A few folk thought he was crazy to go looking for Theran trouble, but Carrul paid them no heed. Lucky thing, too. The scouts stayed on watch for 30 days and nights, and in that time they counted 46 Theran vedettes flying near and into the Thunder Mountains. The vedettes didn't attack a single moot. They just flew over and back and all around. Spy ships, Carrul called them when the scouts told him their news. He didn't know what the Therans were spying for, but all of us knew it couldn't be good. Those cursed Imperials want Barsave back under their yoke, and they never give up. 3 days after the scouts returned, rumors reached our moot that Theran airships and soldiers were massing on the plains north of Travar. Now, we didn't know what they were planning, but it involved the Therans, so we knew it wasn't anything good. In this case, Carrul figured the best defense was a good offense, and nobody disagreed with that. So Carrul gave the order for 5 Drakars to set sail, each manned by 30 chosen warriors. I rode in the third ship, sharing a bench with Morag the Puss-Eyed. Morag in battle is a fearsome thing to behold for all she's so dainty-looking. You needn't laugh. Any troll may look huge to little wisps of elves like you, but Morag's every bit as delicate as you are by comparison to me. Once he'd chosen his warriors, Carrul filled a 6th ship with trolls too old to fight. Now, quite a few of us scratched our heads over this, but Carrul silenced us all with a grin and a few words. "Trust me, as you always have," he told us. "I've plans for this ship. Our success depends on these old ones. Watch, learn, and be ready to fight when I tell you." And such was our respect for Carrul that none questioned him, even though we still didn't understand. That night, we slept on the ship, Morag curled beneath the bench, I lying atop it with no blanket but the stars to cover me. I hardly closed my eyes the whole night, just stared up at the stars until the first blue fingers of dawn poked across the sky. We launched our ships into the morning sunlight, following Carrul down the slopes and into the wooded hills north of Travar. At his order, we set down in a little valley. As we disembarked, he told us to set up our tents and burn as many fires as we could fuel. That done, we packed our war gear and marched southward along the valley's rim. The elders stayed at the valley camp. As we left, I heard them strike up a raucous war dance, howling fit to split the air and stomping on the ground. If the Theran scouts find the camp, they'll think we're all too old and drunk to fight," said Carrul. I saw slow grins spread across the faces of my fellow warriors as they began to see Carrul's scheme. None of us grudged the slow torment of aching shoulders and sore feet as we marched and marched and marched. We knew that Carrul was leading us to victory. Long after the sun had set, we reached a clearing, and Carrul gestured for us to stop. 6 windlings flew out of the trees toward him. He spoke to them in a low voice, then gestured beyond the encircling trees toward the south. The windlings flew off. Carrul watched them go, then saw me staring at him. "What were those pests doing here?" I asked. He raised an eyebrow at me. "Those pests, young Urgu, are some of the best scouts in Barsave, and a lot quieter than we trolls." With that, he wrestled a heavy cloak out of his pack, wrapped himself in it, and settled down to rest. The rest of us found comfort where we could. I curled up against the trunk of an old knot-barked tree and closed my eyes. I didn't sleep much. The scouts returned just before dawn, and we followed Carrul through the woods to the edge of a vast field. 10 Theran airships sat in the middle of it, swarmed over by countless Theran soldiers. Several others were building a barricade from brush and sharpened logs. We crouched in the underbrush and waited for Carrul's signal to attack. Within minutes, a cry rose from the Theran camp as our sentries pointed towards 6 dark shapes hovering just above the tree line. Our elders had come in the Drakars. The Theran soldiers grabbed their swords and spears, and everyone crowded behind the barricade, as if it could protect them from an air attack. So amazed was I that I spoke my thought aloud. Why don't they board their ships? Small feet landed softly on my shoulder, and one of the Windling scouts whispered in my ear. "I'm sure they would, only we've cut their guidelines and stolen their rudders." Our Drakars cleared the trees, then dropped and turned their sides toward the barricade. The Therans let fly a volley of arrows, but they bounced off the solid hulls like straws off a brick wall. Carrul waved his arm. We dashed across the field and crashed through the unguarded side of the Theran's barricade. Our swords and axes cut them down like wheat. Not one escaped alive. The elders landed as the battle wound down, laughing for sheer joy at having helped defeat the Theran enemy. We destroyed their ships, too, leaving the Therans 10 fine airships poorer. We've not seen much of the Therans lately. Nonetheless, on Carrul's advice, we keep close watch on the skies. The Book of Scales. Those who know much of the horrors recognize the most fearsome of them as Vergigorm, the hunter of great dragons. But few know that Vergigorm the Terrible walked the earth in ancient eras and accomplished a dark and terrible deed during a scourge that preceded the one of which we speak. In that time, Vergigorm and certain allies captured a great dragon whose name has been lost to history. The horrors tortured their poor captive, twisting its mind and body with their dark magics until they drove the dragon insane. Then, using still more dreadful spells, Vergigorm bound the poor creature to the horror's evil will. As Vergigorm looked on and laughed, the dragon tore out its own scales and threw them, bleeding, at the feet of its dark master. It ripped out its own claws to use as pens and dipped their tips in its own blood for ink. Compelled by Vergigorm and the great hunter's terrible allies, the dragon inscribed onto its scales the entire corrupt and evil history of the horrors. In time, that scourge ended, and the world's dwindling magic forced the horrors back to the hell that spawned them. The dragon, in its last act before dying, scattered its scales across the land so that none could ever read the book that horror magic had written. None nowadays can say what the horrors meant to accomplish by the dragon's dreadful suffering. Many magicians believe Vergigorm intended the Book of Scales to hold powerful blood magic, to tie the horror's patterns to that of this world. Or the book's creation may have served as a perverted rite of naming. Or perhaps the horrors simply wished to prolong the dragon's agony. For many years, we believed that the horrors failed to accomplish their purpose because they retreated back to their own astral realm. It seems, however, that we may have been too complacent. For in the year 1504 Thrall, a certain windling of Kratos, Ulux by name, left his employment as a messenger and set out in search of ancient dragon scales. He went to the Twilight Peaks, among other places, and came back horribly changed. For once he had done his work well and cheerfully, now he raged around Kratos to no apparent purpose, muttering to himself about pages of a book made from dragon scales. Those who knew him said he had gone mad. They soon discovered how right they were. 2 days after his return to the thieves' city, Ulux flew into an orphanage by night and slit the throats of 6 children. When the screams of the other children woke the workers, they found Ulux flying up and down the rows of beds with a bloody dagger in each hand. And all the while he talked of voices in his head, telling him to kill the children so that he could finish his book. If the unfortunate Windling indeed found pages from the Book of Scales, we can only wonder if the horrors who made it succeeded in their dark intent, not to tie themselves to this world beyond their appointed time, but to sow a seed of blood and pain that in time would bear dreadful fruit. Some say that the history written in the Book of Scales might give us invaluable clues to defeating our terrible adversaries, but at what cost to the adventurous souls who find those long-lost pages? And at what cost to Barsave if all who see the Book of Scales go mad?